amazing. Should bring that down. So again, have another great show. A lot of great news today and some scary news. So we're going to really talk about some of the scary stuff and how to address it for you. One of the biggest complaints I get from people is that as much as they pay down their taxes, the bill doesn't seem to go down. They feel like they're just flushing money down the toilet. We're going to talk about why and how to address it, some of the solutions to it. So, again, it's a very big concern that we see, and there are ways to address this. I've seen this on smaller cases, and I've also seen this on $1 million cases where people are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to get caught up on the tax debt, and they feel like they're on the hamster wheel and not going anywhere. So again, there are ways to tackle that, and there are solutions. So again, we'll paint this way forward and get this taken care of for you. Welcome back, everybody. That break went a little bit long, but we've got a lot of information to cover. We're going to step right into it. Some interesting things here, and first, we're going to touch on some politics first. Los Angeles Times, for the first time in decades, did not endorse Kamala Harris for president. Now, apparently, the paper's owner told them to withhold an endorsement. So this is a 20-year run of endorsing Democrats not happening. And so again, they endorsed her when she ran for Attorney General in 2014, and in 2016 when she ran for U.S. Senate. 2020 endorsed Biden Harris, but then in 2024 is not endorsing Harris. So the question is, where is the paper's billionaire owner coming from? It looks like it's coming from him. Just a little interesting note here. And then as we move forward, that's all I'm going to say about that because it's all there is to it. A little bit of a funny article here. You had a Democratic candidate for Senate and pulled a Dick Cheney. And again, this happens on both sides where someone goes out and they're trying to pretend they're someone that they're not. So in this case, they went out and they were at a shooting range. Here's a photo of the shooting range with the bandage. So you had Democrat Senate candidate Lucas Kunce. I'm not sure how to say that, so I'm guessing. And with Adam Kinzinger, who's a Democrat congressman, and they go out shooting. And he's a Marine veteran and gun owner. He should know what he's doing. But they take an AR-15 style rifle, so a full-on rifle, and they shoot at a metal target, so a steel target, from 5 to 7 yards away. So that's less than 10 yards on a football field, and they're shooting it with a rifle at a steel target. So, of course, shrapnel starts flying, and a piece of shrapnel hits a reporter that they're seeing bandaging there. Again, my brother's a Marine. Love Marines, but doesn't mean they're always doing the smartest things. Lots of gun safety protocol ignored here. Again, this kind of blew up in their face, doing a photo op. And photo ops are what politicians do. I mean, Trump did a photo op at McDonald's the other day. Kamala Harris has done photo ops at the border. I mean, photo ops it just is what it is. But when you're trying to show off your skill and that you are a gun owner and you like to shoot guns, try not to injure other people. Thank goodness it wasn't more serious. And of course, the Josh Hawley, who's the incumbent senator there in Missouri, commented, "I condemn all acts of violence against reporters and call on Kunce never to shoot anyone." So, or never to shoot another one. Ha ha ha. So again, a little funny note, and we need to laugh sometimes, or a lot of times. So this next article is interesting. This is kind of off the beaten path, and normally I wouldn't jump into this. But he goes into a black barbershop in the Bronx. And again, everybody's kind of tickled, laughing at him, whatever. I mean, is everybody a supporter? Probably not. And people start asking him questions. So it's interesting here. He's doing a give and take. And they asked him, what are you going to do differently this time? And he said, hey, it's all about people. So, so he's got, Fox News is in there. This is another photo op, but he's visiting people and actually talking to them. And someone asked, what is one thing you'd probably feel like you didn't do in your first term, you feel you could do better now? And he said, it's all about people. I've got to get the right people. And I've criticized Trump for this, that a lot of the people either with this disloyal, they undercut him, they weren't serious about doing the job. And we're going to talk about why that's so important today. Um, and he tried to emphasize that he's from New York City rather than DC. I mean, he's not a career politician, but he's been in it for over 4 years in the White House. I don't know. I mean, everybody says they're not stuck in the swamp in DC. I'd like to see it happen. Um, but again, his biggest thing is about having the right people in place. And if he does win, I hope that whatever his agenda is, that he has people lined up that actually believe in the agenda, because you're not going to get anywhere. It's going to be a muddled mess unless you get the right people. He did not have the right people last time. And I think that's pretty well acknowledged. One of the things, and this is why I wanted to go to this article, this is what people are alluding to. So he mentioned that, people mentioned the federal income tax, and he said there is a way to get rid of it. So, and again, he goes back and talks about tariffs. He said had all tariffs, no income tax. And I'm not sure I agree with him here, but he talks about the idea of eliminating the income tax and going to consumption taxes, sales taxes. Again, when you destroy trade through tariffs, it could be a huge problem, and it could cause a lot more problems to the economy. But by getting people to save rather than focus on spending, could have a huge positive impact on the long-term health of the economy. So put a pin in that. We're going to come back to this idea. I think that tariffs are the way to go. No. The world, the economy is so different than it was in the 1890s than it is today. It's very hard to make those kinds of comparisons. But again, we do have a lot of issues going on today. So this is an interesting topic. I just want to touch on this fairly quickly. Second bank, to shut down and fail this year as an Oklahoma bank. It's a smaller bank, and the FDIC is covering most of the deposits. Even then, they're going to liquidate the assets of the bank. So most of the uncovered deposits over 250,000 should be covered. So I don't think anybody's going to lose their shirt on this. There were some higher deposits, but accounts more than 250,000. Here's the number to call. And this is the First National Bank of Lindsay. So it's getting swallowed up by a larger bank that's coming on, First National, and they're trying to take care of the people that had their assets in there. But again, there was earlier this year we had First Republic Bank that collapsed in late April. It's only the second collapse this year, which again doesn't sound too horrible. But in 2023, we had 5 failures that were involved 548 billion in assets. So it really hit the news. It's good that things have slowed down dramatically this year as far as bank failures. But taking to this, 23 was the biggest year for banking failure since 2001, even worse than the 2008 financial crisis. So not a good thing. But again, if you are part of that bank, First National Bank of Lindsay, be aware of that. Go in and see what's going on. Now, I'm going to switch gears, and we're going to go talk about Israel, mainly because it's been in the news so much, and it has national security implications. If you're not aware of what's going on, so Secretary of State Blinken travels to Israel and warns them to not escalate the conflict with Iran Hezbollah. So Israel has been responding. For the longest time, they didn't respond. So after October 7th of last year, when Hamas launched their horrific attacks where they raped, slaughtered, murdered babies, children, women. The elderly didn't care. Committed mass human rights atrocities. Hezbollah started attacking Israel in solidarity with Hamas. So northern Israel has had to flee. They've been under regular rocket attacks for most of the last year from Hezbollah. Israel is finally getting around they did respond in some ways, but they're finally getting around to really taking down Hezbollah in a serious way. Their leadership has been decapitated. And what is the U.S. doing? Telling them to do a ceasefire. Telling them not to escalate or not to respond to Iran, that just hit them with hundreds of missiles and rockets. So when they say we stand with Israel and always stand with Israel in its defense, it's also important that Israel respond in ways that do not create greater escalation. Well, are they escalating, or are they trying to stop the continued attacks that have been ongoing? Israel has not retaliated to Iran's direct ballistic missile attack. But again, they have continued to strike at Iran and Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, most recently in Tyre. So again, Israel is expanding where they're targeting Hezbollah. Hezbollah is still firing rockets back. So again, it's as Israel retaliates and tries to stop the rocket attacks on civilian centers, it's going to be an issue. So again, the United States is pushing hard for a ceasefire to end the year-long war, but Hamas is still fighting. Hezbollah is still fighting. And if anything, it looks like Israel would stop and that would just give the terrorists a time to regroup, reorganize, especially after the damage and the destruction to their command structure that's happened. So again, this is the key thing. It's critical that the parties, notably Hezbollah, be moved back from the border, that Lebanese armed forces able to assume their responsibility. However, the UN was supposed to do that with the implementation of Article 1701. Never did that. Hezbollah came in, fortified the border, did the opposite. And so the UN has been particularly useless in this respect. We'll be right back after this break because we're out of time. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for watching us here at Taxes Made Easy. So live or rebroadcast. Finishing up with this last article, we're just going to move on to the next article. This is, again, ads always popping up, goes into one of the biggest issues here, and this is we're telling Israel to trust us, to do a ceasefire. At the same time, it's been a huge issue that Israel hasn't been able to trust the United States. So there's been multiple times where information has leaked out from our Department of Defense all the way up to, again, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, classified information getting out, and in response to Iran's massive strike against Israel, they were going to respond. They said they were going to respond, and then they didn't. So the problem here is, again, this is from the National Review, that these things have continued to be leaked, and especially sensitive information, classified information about Israel's response was leaked out on the public and essentially sent to Iran. Again, this is a huge egg on the face of our country that someone stabbed one of our main allies in the middle, or our main ally in the Middle East, Israel, in the back. And so this is a huge, huge issue. So this article really goes over how, when we look at the details, Iran scandal has gotten worse. So What should be obvious, though, is that no individual who has had extensive contact with Iranian intelligence, intelligence is a nice way of saying spy network, and diplomatic officials should never have been put in a sensitive place or position to have access to these documents and other very key documents. This simple rule has been ignored. You have the Biden Iran envoy Robert Malley, who's suspended currently, but he's still technically working for them. And then you have an Ariane Tabatabai. So she's worked for Iran's Experts Initiative, which really cultivated spies in our government. So as to cultivate relationships with foreign academics who would carry water, argue for the regime, and be their argue for their behalf. So she was an academic, and then she was brought into the government. So she skipped a conference in Israel after an Iranian official instructed her not to go. So she acted according to Iran's orders. And she also consulted with the same Iran official about how she should testify before Congress. This is not someone that should be having. I mean, obviously they're marching to Iran's orders. Her job today is chief of staff to the Pentagon official who oversees special operations. So there's a few people like this, and again, it's really scary when we have people in sensitive positions leaking this information, and it's very, very damaging to our allies. So you wonder why Israel didn't tell us about the Patriot attacks. You wonder why they didn't tell us about taking out Israeli Hezbollah and Hamas leaders. It's because they don't trust us, and they have plenty of reasons not to trust us, which is not good for a long-term relationship. So moving forward, quick article. It's just kind of silly that we're even talking about this. We talk about foreign interference in our elections. There was the big Russia scandal, but the Democrats are doing it openly by inviting people working for the Liberal Labour Party in England and sending current and former staffers to battleground states to help Harris Waltz. This is classic foreign interference. It is illegal. Trump-Vance campaign is suing over this. Again, it's just silly. Whoever thought of this should be fired. So 100 Labour Party staff coming to North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Virginia to try to help Kamala Harris win the election. This is clearly foreign interference in an election, and it's silly that it's even happening. Moving forward, and President Biden, and this is just half. Sorry, I hate to be so political here. Again, arguing for Trump to be locked up at a New Hampshire event. Again, we talk about having civility, and then we come up with this language. Now, to be fair, Trump called for Hillary Clinton to be locked up in his 2016 presidential campaign due to the big spit, smashing things with hammers, destruction of evidence, and said that she broke multiple laws. So, again, doesn't help the vitriol, the hate. It goes back and forth. Trump did it at Hillary, so is it fair game for Biden to do it to say that Trump should be locked up? And they're actually trying to lock Trump up. I think that's a big difference. They've been trying for years. So again, just on both sides, we just need some normalcy, and that's one of a lot of people's biggest criticisms of Trump, that he doesn't call for unity, and he comes off as a divisive figure. So one of the biggest news that came out yesterday, and again, this is from Red State, but this is national news. There's plenty of news sites talking about this. So we just ended a fiscal year, October 5th, and I was surprised. A lot of people were surprised that the overspending for fiscal year 23-24 was only 1.8 trillion. So we only spent 1.8 trillion over our income. So again, we brought in around 6 trillion. We spent just over 4 trillion. So the number came out to 1.8 trillion. But what happened in the last 3 weeks, essentially since the fiscal year ended, it has jumped to unreal levels. So 473 billion in 3 weeks. And we're going to jump to that. But again, the national debt jumped almost $500 billion in just 3 weeks alone. So is this the government playing funny games with the numbers here? So if you look at this chart, again, it's goes up and down. I mean, it looks pretty number. And then here you have this huge jump right after the fiscal year ended. If you think that's an accident, I have a bridge to sell you to Russia. It's a wonderful bridge. I'll give you a deal on it. It's just one of those things that it's just like, come on. And it just goes to show that they are not serious. For fiscal year of 2024-25, we are already almost $500 billion in the hole in the first 3 weeks of the year, which means they really did overspend well over 1.8 trillion, well into 2 trillion, but that would make national headlines and make the current government, look bad. So let's play games and just put off the spending and count it towards the next fiscal year. Now, to be fair, neither party is serious about this. But for the government to do this, it's very disingenuous. It's lying, withholding information from the American public, and it's really shameful the fact that we are spending well. I mean, our U.S. deficit spending are at World War II levels. So when we were fighting two wars, one in Germany, fighting the Nazis in Germany and the Imperial Japanese. So we're fighting a two-front war, and of course our spending is going to be off the roof when we're fighting for the free world. 2024, we're spending over $1 trillion in interest. That doesn't reduce the debt, it's just an interest. So unsustainable is an understatement. Something must change. Again, there's really this is probably the biggest news out there, because it doesn't matter what Trump or Harris does if this is not addressed. It's taxes are going to go through the roof, inflation's going to go through the roof, and we are going to be in for a world of hurt. So again, this really mentions 3 ways out of this mess. We can repudiate the debt and just say, we're not paying it. So what happens to that? Our credit goes down the toilet, and it really would hurt the global economy, and it would hurt a lot of Americans, retirees that have invested and bought U.S. bonds, etc., as considered safe bets. We can inflate our way out of it, which is, we're not really doing that now. We're inflating our way, but just for more government spending. We're not using it to address the debt. But the more inflation you have, the more these dollars are worth less. But again, it destroys the economy. Just look at the German Weimar Republic after World War I, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. There's so many examples. Argentina until the last year or so. It just makes it easy to pay us a national debt with worthless dollars. But again, it's almost the same as repudiating the debt, but you absolutely destroy your economy and make savings worthless, inflation through the roof. We could grow our way out of it, but to do so, you have to have a federal government that can have pro-growth policies. And the problem is that Congress always spends more than we bring in. And until we get serious about addressing the spending, nothing's going to change. It's just going to get worse. So again, this is Rand Paul, who is one of the few people speaking out about about this. He's not the only one, but he's one of the main ones that has really spoken about congressional spending. He says we spend like drunken sailors. This year we spend $6 trillion while taking in only $4 trillion. And again, it really is devastating where we're heading. And then it's going to really harm people. So his suggestion, the author's suggestion here, is just gut the government. It's easy. Gut the government. Get rid of the EPA, education, energy, AmeriCorps, labor, commerce, IRS. He says, of course, get rid of the IRS. I don't know about that. We do need to bring in money. We need to hold people accountable. But if you shift things where it's a consumption society, do we need the IRS? Very possibly not, if they change things enough. And that will definitely hurt my industry. But again, if it's what's best for the American people, great. But again, that it's going to involve a lot of change, a lot of pain to go through this, but we have to cut spending. And it's not just Democrats, it's Republicans too. So just some of the comments about this. And this is, linked to the article. Here's the chart. So looking at, 473 billion jumped over just the last 3 weeks. And we now owe 103,700 for every American. We paid 1.16 trillion of interest in fiscal year 2024. In interest alone, we paid 3,360 for every American during fiscal year 24. What's the long-term plan? Apparently there is none. So some of these comments really do highlight it. There's no fiscal commitment. There's no fiscal plan. Long-term plan is there isn't one. So let's wait till it gets worse, then we'll figure it out kind of situation. And that's exactly what our politicians are doing. So very frustrating. And again, just really hope that whoever gets into office is serious about it. To be honest, Kamala Harris has plenty of spending plans and no plans to cut. President Trump has talked about cutting income taxes, but he really hasn't put down a spending reduction plan. So he talks a good game. He talks a lot about pro-growth policies, but unless we tackle spending, because we're spending $6 for every $4 that we could bring in right now. These adjustments are only going to be superficial unless we really take a chainsaw to the federal government and hack it back. And one of these concerns is you look at what Argentina did. That's exactly what Milei has done in Argentina, and it had some pretty immediate effects on the economy. But then you get a lot of government workers that are going to be laid off. There's going to be short-term pain that comes with it. So moving forward, and this is the IRS. They do this every single year, and this is one thing that kills me. So they came out, notable changes for tax year 25. Yes, they updated the standard deductions. They increased these numbers. So here are the new marginal tax rate for single, married, single and married. For single, this chart, this column of 5, and then married for here. Here's the funny thing. When you look at the increase of the marginal tax rates and the standard deduction, how much did they raise it? And I did some quick calculations. 2.7%. 2.7% change. So if you think real inflation is at 2.7%, you must be buying the government numbers, which are completely divorced from reality. So the truth of the matter is, when the government doesn't acknowledge real inflation happening out there and the real cost of living, barely raising the standard deductions and marginal rates is an effective tax increase on the American people. So if your dollars are worth less and you have to pay more in taxes if they make a small adjustment of 2.7%, but actual interest, especially over the last few years, If actual inflation was much higher than that, which it has been, that inflation is eating away at your pocketbook. It is making so you need more dollars to purchase the same amount of goods. And it's also hitting you in the pocketbook here with taxes. So didn't mean to get too much in the weeds, but again, it's another way that it's hurting people. So you can find these on irs.gov. There are plenty of websites talking about this announcement, but they're not talking about how it's hurting you, that they are only allowing for a small percent of inflation rather than looking at the total bill. Now, on that, I want to switch gears and jump to the main topic of the day, and that is dealing with this issue of people struggling with the IRS, fighting with the IRS. So when you first owe taxes, and this is why I tell everything, the very first thing you need to do is stop the damage moving forward. When the guy got shot by the, he's a former Marine, but, Marines aren't always the brightest. Sorry to my brother, but again, yeah, they didn't follow safety protocols at all. But the very first thing you do is stop the bleeding, stop the damage. So when I talk to people, that's my very first thing is like, look, we have to contain the damage and make sure it doesn't continue moving forward. So if you're going to owe for 2023 and you just filed your return, yeah, you're going to get smacked with some penalties. But even worse yet, if you owe for 2024, the interest rate has gone up for 24 for failure to make estimated tax payments, and you're going to get hit all over again if you owe for 2024 when you file your taxes next year. So again, I met with someone yesterday. We were talking about, okay, let's get square with 2023. 2024, where are you? He's already going to owe, so we're going to wrap that in and try to limit the damage, but at least make sure he gets his tax return filed timely. But then for 2025, we're already talking about 2025 because it's starting in January. How do you make sure you're not going to continue to owe? How do you make sure you don't get hit with penalties and interest? It's by making sure that you pay your estimated taxes on time and helping people get straight moving forward. So we're going to continue with this after the break. Welcome back, everybody, for this last session. And really going to continue on with this topic of how do you deal with the crazy interest and penalties that get charged when you owe taxes. So first of all, understanding why you're getting hit with these penalties is the first part of this. The worst penalty, the nastiest penalty that people get hit with, first of all, is failure to file timely. And you can beat this penalty even if you don't have anything ready. You can file a return, get something filed by the deadline, and then amend it. So again, there are situations that happen where someone didn't have control of getting their return filed, but usually it's a problem with the taxpayer not getting their stuff together, or their CPA isn't on it, or they have a situation where they just can't get the information. So again, get something filed, put it as a placeholder, and then amend the return. People do that all the time, and as new information comes in. But the best way to get a hold of this is to address your taxes early. And sometimes you're waiting from 1099s, you're waiting for and from K1s if you're working for other companies, and sometimes you can't help but go to the extension. But there are ways to address this, and if get a return filed, report it some other way, and if K1 comes in later, you can go in and amend your return and change how it was reported. But again, failure to file is the number one. The penalty for that is 4.5% a month until it maxes out at 25%. That's pretty nasty. And that's these stack. All these penalties stack. So if you don't file an extension by April 15th, you're going to start hitting that penalty right there. Now, the second biggest penalty is failure to pay. Now, when does that penalty start? It doesn't start at the same time. So a lot of people get confused if they file an extension. That saves them for the failure to file penalty till October 15th or September 15th for corporate returns. But one of the big misassumptions there is that or mistakes, is that they also assume that it's going to protect them from failure to file penalty. Failure to file penalty starts April 15th. Now, depending on your status, if you're not in collections, it's only 5% a month. If you're in a collection status, it goes up to 1% a month. So it accrues much slower than your failure to file. The failure to file is it's the nastiest penalty by far. But that also maxes out at 25%. But congressionally, those two, the failure to file and failure to pay, can only max out at 47.5%. So if you aren't on top of your tax returns moving forward, you're not paying, and it takes you a couple of years to actually start paying on it, that's a 47.5% premium on your taxes right there. So you can, the nastiest is the failure to file. You can beat that by just filing timely. And again, if you've made mistakes in the past, fine, we'll try to deal with those. But moving forward, let's triage this thing, stop the bleeding. Let's not make the problem worse. That's a very first step when you go in. Someone gets shot at a shooting range, or gets shot in the face with birdshot by Dick Cheney. That's one of the first steps. Stop the damage, stop the bleeding. And once you get a handle on that, you have to understand that now Congress has passed. It's not just paid by April 15th, but you want to make sure, if you can, that everything's paid in full by April 15th. Avoid those penalties. But if you are not having sufficient taxes paid throughout the year, and this is bipartisan, Congress in November of 23 increased that amount to an 8% penalty. So if you don't have enough withholdings, you need to save some money on taxes, and it's very easy for people to think, hey, I'll just pay less than taxes and deal with it. The premium you're going to pay on that is steep. So that 8% is added to the 47.5%. So right now we're looking at 55.5% markup if you didn't pay timely throughout 2024. And that 8% is for this year of 2024. And you didn't file your returns and you didn't pay. That's a 55%. And that's the thing, that 8% is not capped. So that's 8% for not paying. And then ongoing interest is 8% annually. So add 8% to that 55.5% every year you don't pay. So, and it's compounding interest. So it's not flat interest. When you have compounding interest, you get smacked with 47.5%. And then you add 8% on top of that. It gets even worse. So again, just to kind of give you an idea, if you haven't paid anything and you're at 55.5%, that increases the penalty, or how much percentage you're paying, to 59.94% on those previous taxes. Plus, this is getting into statistics, just actually, it gets you to 67.94% after the first couple years. And every year you're adding 8% on top of that. So you can see how this can easily double over time. And a lot of people complain, it's just penalties and interest. Yeah, because you let it sit for so long. You didn't file your taxes timely. So a huge chunk of this, at least 22.5%, you could avoid by just filing your taxes on time. If you can get on some kind of plan to pay things down, that really helps reduce these interests. So that's the first thing we do, is we help people save money moving into the future, stop the bleeding, and then we can look at ways to reduce penalties and interest. So there are a few programs that you have to qualify for to reduce penalties and interest. And trust me, there are plenty of times that people call in, hey, can I cut this down? Can I reduce this? And we look at them and say, given your situation, no. Guy I talked to last night, that was his big things. He wanted a settlement. He wanted to do something. He had a huge chunk of money just a few years ago, didn't pay his taxes, he invested it, etc. And that's what caused this huge tax burden. The IRS today is going after that. He will not qualify for an offer in compromise. We are seeing them reject offers right and left based on that criteria alone. Could that change in the next couple of years? Who knows? We get a new administration that might, again, the IRS is making offer and compromises harder than ever. And it's very possible in a couple of years he could qualify to do a settlement and wipe it out. But you got to remember, an offer and compromise is like Cinderella's slipper. It's a beautiful glass slipper. If it's amazing, it's an amazing thing, and everybody wants it. But not everybody's foot will fit into it. So if you feel like you're trying to shoehorn yourself into an offer and compromise, and I will be flexible, don't get me wrong, I will be flexible. But if the shoe fits, great, it's an amazing service. But it usually fits for only about 20 to 30% of taxpayers that owe tax debt. It's not for everybody. Because it's not for everybody, the people that are trying to shoehorn it in usually end up giving bad advice to their clients, and especially given the difficult situation that it's in. How hard it is to get offers accepted. Don't hang your hat on that. Don't think, I have to get an offer and compromise. That's the only way to deal with it. You can do penalty abatement. So there's a first-time penalty abatement, and then there's an 843 penalty abatement. The first-time penalty abatement is very quick, easy to find out if you qualify. You can even call and ask for it yourself. They just run the numbers, and if you haven't had any tax problems for the first and the prior 3 years, so if you owed for 2023 and you didn't have any tax issues for 19, 20, well, actually 20, 21, and 22, so the 3 prior years, you didn't have any tax issues, no penalties assessed. Doesn't matter if you owed and paid it off. If you had any penalties assessed, you're not going to qualify. But if you had a clean filing history for the prior 3 years, they can go and remove some of the interest and penalties, not all, but they'll remove the failure to pay, failure to file penalties, plus the associated interest, not all of the interest. So be very aware of that. And again, I've seen small penalties of a couple dollars stop abatements of thousands upon thousands of dollars. It's just a computer system. If you qualify, great, it'll approve it. If you don't qualify it, it'll reject it. So the second type of penalty abatement is called an 843 reasonable cause. Very hard to get. It is 12 to 18 months. We have gotten it approved for our clients, but it is a lot of work, and you have to be very, very patient with that. So again, it has to make sense for your situation, and you have to have the facts to support something like that. So be very mindful of that it's not for everybody. The other ways are, first of all, just because you owe the debt doesn't mean you have to pay all of it. I shared the other day how someone was really happy with us. They owed $800,000. We set them up on a payment plan, an installment agreement of $130 a month. So over $130 a month, at most, they're going to pay around $15,000. And with time, the entire $800,000 will go away. And that's something that's very doable for the clients. Why don't I just do an offer for them? Because they had assets. They have other issues that make an offer untenable at this point, and problematic. But if they stay on this offer and this installment agreement, they don't owe again. They're retired. They're on a fixed income. So things aren't going to really change for them. It kicks out down the road how long they will have, or the IRS will have to collect. So just recently did another case where we said, look, might have to pay $300 or less on a very large debt, a couple $100,000 debt. Over time, you might pay $20,000-$30,000 if you stay on this. But if your situation changes, and that's the thing, if you have a very volatile situation, you have a new job, you're moving, your expenses are really low, you might not qualify now for an offer in compromise. But I would absolutely check in, and when your situation changes, you might qualify in the future. And that addresses not only the underlying tax, but all the interest and penalties with it. And when tax debt expires, the underlying tax and the penalty and interest goes away. So be willing to be creative. Don't go in and think, I have to have an installment agreement or I have to have an offer in compromise. There are ways to help you out and provide you the tax relief you need. But again, it has to be tailored to your situation. So number one recommendation, get ahead. And that's why I talk so much about going and yesterday I talked about going and talking to a tax professional now. If you're not happy with your CPA, get a second opinion now. CPAs are still working. They're still looking at cases. Again, they just passed October 15th. So some of them are taking a little vacation, but their offices are still open. If you're following up and trying to connect with a CPA the week of Thanksgiving, good luck. If you're waiting until Christmas to connect with the CPA, good luck. And again, if you are waiting until January, it might be too late. We do work with plenty of CPAs, but our best CPAs, that we had a few of them tell us, we've got our fill. We can't handle anybody more right now. After tax season, we can look at taking some other people. So after April 15th, they took on more clients. But again, the best CPAs will recognize when they're full, and they'll take on what they can chew and deal with. But so we do work with other CPAs as well, but be mindful, the longer you wait, the harder it is to get your tax returns on time and to lessen those penalties and interest for you. And there's absolutely no reason that we can't file an extension for you. But don't get proof that it's done. Don't just rely on your tax preparer because, again, I see people all the time, just this week, people that thought that extensions were filed, they were never filed, and now they're getting hit with all these penalties and interest. So, and they had asked their CPA to file for them, and it didn't happen. There's all sorts of reasons why they don't. But again, you have to follow up, know what's happening with your CPA. So if you need a good referral, if you need to get on track, if things have been in trouble in the past, give us a call. We'll straighten you out. We'll get you on a path moving forward. Well, this will be addressed and go over all of your rights and options for you. So again, it's dealing with the IRS and state taxes has never been harder. Well, I can't say that. In recent history, it's never been harder, but there's always a pathway moving forward. So again, if you feel like you're spinning your wheels, you're on a hamster wheel, I'm paying, and not getting anywhere, a lot of it might be the way you're going about it. Don't pay the oldest tax first. Pay your most recent tax that's still accruing the maximum rate of penalties and interest. Remember that 47.5% caps out over time. And the sooner you pay it, the sooner you file your tax returns, the sooner those penalties stop. So again, give us a call at 520-485-7371 or reach out to us at guardiantaxlaw.com. And to watch this show and other shows with the associated links, you can always find us on our YouTube channel, which is linked at the very top of our website at guardiantaxlaw.com. Hope you have a great day, and let's get ready for next tax season so then we can relax and enjoy the holidays coming up. Have a great day.